deported.
So this may be one of the most ridiculous immigration stories we've ever covered, and conveniently, it's closely linked to Operation Epic Fury, because today, Marco Rubio and the U.S. State Department announced that they will be arresting and deporting members of Qasem Soleimani's family from the United States. Now, for context, these people are here because they claim to be seeking political asylum. In other words, they came to the United States claiming that, well, although we are related to Soleimani, we're the dissidents. We're against the regime. We actually fear for our lives back in Iran, and therefore we want America to take us in. And it turns out, folks, that absolutely none of that was true. They're not against the regime. As a matter of fact, they are public supporters of the regime, publicly saying death to America while living in America, which is deeply ironic and hypocritical on a number of levels. But I suppose when you're dealing with the elite class of an authoritarian regime, it typically does go this way, right? You know, the top members of the Soviet Union claim, oh, hate America, we're going to ban our people from going. And then what are they doing all the time? Hanging out in the West, enjoying Western culture. You know how this type of stuff goes. It's the same behavior. Champagne socialism is the word we often use, although in this case, I guess it is champagne jihadism, right? They tell their people, oh, put on the burqa, Islamic law, and then they come to this country. And I kid you not, for example, you have the daughter of this Soleimani relative who, we repeat, is supporting the Islamic regime while living in this country, let's say, doing things that would be considered deeply immodest by Islamic Republic standards, right? Enjoying the nightlife, wearing outfits that, let's say, are not exactly allowed under Islamic law, enjoying herself, etc., and it goes on. It turns out, apparently, that on top of the fact they were still supporting Iran, this family repeatedly took several visits and trips back to Iran while they were on supposed asylum and getting green cards. So we repeat, these people, of course, claim that they had to flee for their lives and they were in danger in Iran, and yet they're going back there on a regular basis. Seems like that's completely full of crap, and this story just gets even more ridiculous the more you learn about it. So that said, guys, we'll tell you about this here today. We'll go through the full chronicle. We, by the way, are fully waiting and expecting for liberals to start protesting any moment now on behalf of the Soleimani family, right? Are they going to start rioting? Are they going to start driving their cars at ICE agents? Because how dare you deport this lovely pro-American immigrant neighbor from the United States? It's crazy. It's insane. And by the way, it is a huge propaganda blow to the Islamic regime. Because what does that say? It's now an international scandal. Oh, the elite class of your country, right? The political class. They say to their people, you have to live like this. And yet, how do they live, right? How do they behave? Very telling. Let's get into all of it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, take a listen to the announcement here from Marco Rubio. Until recently, Hamideh Soleimani Afshar and her daughter were green card holders living lavishly in the United States. Afshar is the niece of the deceased Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani. She is also an outspoken supporter of the Iranian regime who celebrated attacks on Americans and referred to our country as the Great Satan. We kid you not. Again, America's the Great Satan. We support Iran, but let's lie about that. Immigrate to the United States, take advantage of economic benefit or whatever in this country, while, of course, advocating against the country. Although, in total fairness to the Soleimani family, let's be real about this. She's far from alone, okay? That is a very common phenomenon in the modern immigration system as a whole. I mean, how many people are we bringing into this country who just straight up hate it? They advocate for the countries in which they came. You know, you could almost argue to an extent, nothing is all that exceptional about Hamideh Soleimani Afshar, right? It's just, another immigrant in 2026 in America, right? That's what's going on here, you know? It's no different. How is she tangibly different, I'm sorry, from someone like Ilhan Omar? Ilhan Omar is in Congress. She likewise defrauded the United States, committed immigration fraud on multiple different cases, publicly advocates that she hates this country, she's against it, and yet she's in the U.S. government. So frankly, if I were Afshar and I were trying to plead a legal case right now, I'd say, hey, wait a minute. How am I any different than the average Democrat politician in Congress, right? How am I different from Ilhan Omar or Sri Thanadar or all the people rioting in the streets, right? You know, it goes on. So anyways, you have that. But yeah, again, totally an asylum seeker, by the way, right? An Iranian dissident, allegedly. This week, I terminated both Afshar and her daughter's legal status, and they are now in ICE custody, pending removal from the United States. The Trump administration will not allow our country to become a home for foreign nationals who support anti-American terrorist regimes. Again, I say sounds like common sense, but we await the liberal protests, okay? That is like the average type of migrant, illegal, immigration fraudster, or whatever, that liberal activists will take to the streets to protest on behalf of. So I repeat, nothing is exceptional about this person, but hey, they got caught. DHS confirms to Fox News, according to Bill Malugin, that the deceased Iranian General Soleimani's niece first entered the U.S. in 2015 on a tourist visa, okay? They were granted asylum in 2019, so you have to wonder why that took so long, right? Were they living in the country illegally or whatever? We have no idea, but okay. They applied for asylum using this whole BS line that the Iranian government is against them or something. Then got her green card, of course, expedited under the Biden administration in 2021. She applied for U.S. citizenship last July, but disclosed that she had traveled to Iran at least 4 times since getting her green card, which DHS says proves her asylum claim was fraudulent, which is, of course, again, absolutely the case, 100% true. Now, leftists will try to argue against that. They say, oh, no, why are you so mean to the illegals, aka the so-called asylum seekers? Why? Because this behavior is extremely common, right? They're defrauding the asylum system. From the beginning, this person, much like many other immigration fraudsters in this country, lied to the government and took advantage of the entire system. She was arrested by ICE Los Angeles yesterday. In a DHS statement to Fox, they said, quote, on April 3rd, 2026, ICE officers in Los Angeles arrested Hamideh Soleimani Afshar and the grandniece, the daughter here, Sarah Nadsadat Hosuni, the niece and grandniece of Soleimani. And this person, as you know, we just went over all those details. But yeah, in July 2025, she filed a naturalization application where she disclosed she had traveled to Iran at least 4 different times, illustrating, yes, that her asylum claim there was completely fraudulent, right? So a lot of questions here that need to be asked, of course. Again, we repeat, it's totally insane. But folks, the story doesn't stop there, okay? Because while the mom here, while the niece of Soleimani is saying death to America, supporting Iran while trying to seek U.S. citizenship and saying death to America at the same time, right? We noticed that the daughter here in question was apparently enjoying a luxury lifestyle in the United States. As you can see, you know, this right here is her Instagram. And let me just say, she doesn't seem as if she's exactly living within the standards, right, of the Islamic regime. And the answer there is, of course, no. You see some of these pictures, by the way. I mean, look at this. I mean, what's going on here? You know, let's just say, yeah, again, I think this might be considered a little bit slightly immodest for Iran. Might even be considered slightly immodest for America, let's say. But after all, right? Again, we repeat, average behavior of elite people within apparently the Islamic Republic, right? Notice how they claim, oh, we support Iran. And then they come to this country. They're totally involved in what you could even call, to an extent, like Western cultural degeneracy, right? The very things that even the jihadis maybe criticize America for. And, you know, there you have her, right? There you have her, like she's on a boat in a bikini. She's attending a rave, you know, dressed in all of that. You know, you can see some of these pictures, and the comments on this are hilarious, you know. Imagine everyone in Iran has to wear a pillowcase while the head jihadi's granddaughter was being a skank in LA living the nightlife, right? Which is exactly, of course, what is going on here, you know. She proclaimed death to America while enjoying a luxury lifestyle in the United States. And it goes on and on. Death to America, but let's send our kids there. Fakest revolutionaries of all time. Which is, of course, again, another valid point. And maybe part of the reasons why I repeat, this, in my eyes, is a major propaganda defeat, actually, for the Iranian government. And hopefully this information, right, makes it through the internet, makes it through to people in Iran, because it's very telling. But anyways, here's the full story from the New York Post on the daughter here. As you can see, notorious Soleimani's grandniece led lavish lifestyle, touring U.S. hotspots as her mom supported the Iranian regime. Again, average immigration story these days. She's a bombshell, the glam grandniece of slain Iranian terrorist Qasem Soleimani, frequented several U.S. hotspots and lived a lavish lifestyle in L.A. before being scooped up by ICE on Friday. So we went over those details already. But the 25-year-old social media show that she's living a luxurious vacation-centric lifestyle while living in the country her mother referred to as the Great Satan. Gosh. So you can see she shared these photos of jet setting on private planes, sunbathing on yachts, dancing at music festivals while showing no signs of gainful employment. Whoa. We, by the way, wonder where this family got the money from, you know? Turns out they probably weren't being persecuted all that much by the Iranian regime. As a matter of fact, the Iranian regime, which they are high-level figures in, was completely subsidizing the lifestyle. And I'm again going to say, I don't know if this outfit that you can see her in right now is all that jihadist compliant. Okay, we'll put it that way. Ridiculous. So Instagram posts show that Hassani has recently traveled to Miami, where she posed with drinks, to Alaska, where she still managed to take snaps in a bikini, in Las Vegas, where she attended an F1 race. Other posts showed Hassani donning skin-tight dresses, barely there bikinis, and skirts well north of the knee, right? So, there you basically have it. In one photo taken from the floor, she wears fishnets in a skirt that does not cover her butt. An outfit that certainly would not fly in Iran. So there you go. Now, she was admitted to the U.S. on a student visa in 2015, and guess what? Given a green card by the Biden administration, in 2023, who apparently never stopped to vet and look at the fact, hey, this family's publicly supporting Iran. Their asylum claim is completely fraudulent. No, it actually took Homeland Security and the U.S. government to step in under the Trump administration and realize, oh, this person is an anti-American lunatic, and it's the mom at least, right? And it's not all that hard to figure out. Yeah, gee, you don't say. So anyways, the news is, however, she will, of course, be sent back to Iran. That's probably going to be a little bit of a rough transition. This Emirati guy puts it quite well. They chant death to the Great Satan while their families travel to the land of the Great Satan for work and study. Then they accuse us of being agents for America. Yeah, correct. And I think this is a great point, honestly, I didn't initially consider, but yeah, think about the propaganda victory this is for the anti-regime movement, right? Because I was considering this from the American perspective, but from the Arabic, Iranian, and Muslim perspective, this is a huge propaganda coup for the American government. These photos completely discredit Iran at a moment when Iranian soldiers are deserting and demoralized, which is true. By the way, we're now watching tonight in Iran. We may cover, looks like new anti-regime protests are beginning to break out in certain cities. So the timing of this, honestly, could not have been better. And honestly, you might look at it and say, why wasn't this person immediately found out and denaturalized, deported at the beginning of the Trump administration? But I would argue, I don't know if the State Department purposely held on to this information for the right time, Especially, we know militarily, Epic Fury is trending to wrap up here in a few weeks. Very likely, you would guess the next step is that the U.S. government wants Iranian people to start rising up, right? Perfect moment to drop this information, right? That just shows the total hypocrisy, the corruption of the regime, right? How much they lie, both to their own people and to the U.S. government. He goes on to say, this is such a brilliant propaganda coup. To wait a month into this war to drop on the Muslim world, Rubio and Trump patiently sat on this and waited for the opportune moment, which is, of course, completely true. So yeah, just an utterly insane story. And I have to say, I wish my Vietnamese grandfather were alive to see this. Okay, we're alive to see people doing stuff like this right here. And I alluded to this story a couple of days ago, and a lot of you commented that you were genuinely interested in hearing a more broader explanation, more details on it, maybe even the full story. Maybe I'll get into the full thing at some point. But to make a long story short, okay, my family basically went through the exact opposite situation of this, and to an extent, I wonder if my grandfather were alive today, what he would say about this, right? Because to explain, okay, I have both white American lineage and Vietnamese lineage. So on my white side, my grandfather was a Vietnam War combat veteran for the U.S. Navy. He was the captain of an Alpha boat on the Mekong Delta. So that's what he did. Pretty dangerous job, by the way. Saw a lot of combat. But then on the other side, my Vietnamese grandfather was a top figure within the South Vietnamese military and government. I believe something like a major general, don't know the exact rank. Again, this guy's not alive, so I don't know the full details here. But what I do know from family history is that basically when Saigon fell in 1975, he was an important enough figure to where he managed to get airlifted off with the Americans. So if you see those historical videos of U.S. helicopters fleeing the embassy to the aircraft carrier and then they all dump them off the aircraft carrier, right? Very likely my grandfather is in one of those videos. He's on one of those helicopters, okay? So, that's who he was. He basically was in some form, I guess, an important enough U.S. asset to where they allowed him to get out. Because obviously, a lot of people did not get out that day. And, I have other family members that ended up in concentration camps and stuff like that. But anyways, okay. So when he got to America, I don't know his exact immigration status. I would assume maybe initially it was something like political asylum, right? And that's a valid claim to political asylum because you fought alongside the Americans. You're a very important figure in the military and in the government. The communists are looking for you, okay? Like there's actual reason to fear for your life. And we know you're not anti-American because you're on the side that fought with the Americans, so they took him in. But then here's the thing, okay? So back in Vietnam, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because the ridiculousness of the timeline here I find to be shocking, okay? Because back in Vietnam, the rest of the family had no idea this guy was alive for an entire year, okay? It was just widely assumed he was dead. The NVA, which is the North Vietnamese military, camped out at our house apparently for like 6 months looking for him, waiting for him to come home. So that's how big of a bounty he had on his head, right? So basically, my family goes a full year just thinking he's dead. And it's only a year later they get a letter from, I believe it was Columbus, Ohio, saying, hey, I made it out with the Americans. I'm in America. I'm alive. And I'm going to try to get you guys over here. But here's the thing, right? So it took 6 years. It took 6 years from 1975 to 1981. It took 6 years for my grandfather to move them over to America, basically on green cards, right, on permanent residence. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because you notice, so they still had to live 6 years in communist Vietnam. And in the meantime, by the way, the communist government is taking our stuff. Other family members are ending up in concentration camps. The older members of my family basically describe it like, oh, we didn't have food and they took all of our stuff. But now going back and researching and watching some of the scenes from that time, I'd assume it was a lot worse than that, okay? But basically, for those 6 years, because of our last name, we're being heavily persecuted, right? And my grandfather is a U.S. asset, right? He's a special U.S. protected person. And then despite all of that, here's my point. Despite all of that, we don't get any like special way to cut the line, right? It still took 6 years to move them over to the United States in the end, which thankfully it still happened, right? But the reason I'm bringing that up is because you notice these people. Joe Biden basically gave them green cards immediately, didn't even question their asylum claim, right? And these people are not even actual asylum seekers. They're fake asylum seekers. It's the equivalent as if instead of giving it to a South Vietnamese general, you granted asylum. America during the 70s granted asylum to a North Vietnamese general. It would be like, what the heck is going on there, right? But, as I said, this sort of really does reflect a lot of the modern immigration system in itself. And, some people often come to me and try to make these arguments. Oh, how can you speak about immigration or how can you oppose the modern immigration system when parts of your family were immigrants or whatever? And I bring up, well, because the type of immigration, you can call it that they did, is like polarly opposite to what's happening now, right? Because keep in mind, my family were not even economic migrants in the sense, oh, we're just going to go move to America because we want to make money or live a better life. No, there was a very deep situation here obviously going on. And in a way, you could say my grandfather quite literally fought for the green card, like put his life on the line for the green card. And that's what it was all about, right? So, and by the way, as it pertains to the Vietnamese diaspora in America, the scenes you see, the sort of expression of ethnic pride looks like this right here, right? American flags everywhere, very grateful to be in this country, super anti-communist, super patriotic. This is the culture I grew up around. So yeah, I don't view myself or my heritage or anything as being associated with, let's say, these migrants of today in any way, because it's the exact opposite of everything, this picture right here, I guess you could say, stands for to an extent, Like we didn't take government benefits because literally my grandfather thought it was immoral to do, The idea of importing a literal foreign hostile asset to this country who's against the US government and is actually supporting a regime that's fighting a war against America, again, literally mentally insane, okay? And frankly, even the idea of opening the border or having mass immigration at such a level where it's replacing the native population, and destroying the country as a whole, that's never been something that historically, I felt any identification with, just because, some of your family are immigrants. There's a very special story around all of that. We're not just random quote unquote, migrants who showed up at the southern border. We're not even people who just decided to take advantage of America to make money. That's the story here, right? And so, I'm just bringing that all up to say that, that's when I heard this story, that's the first thing that came to mind. I was like, man, imagine taking my family story and turning it exactly opposite on the head. And you have Qasem Soleimani's family here, that's crazy. That's insane. And again, we don't associate with these people. Okay. They make past actual asylum seekers or whatever, like my grandfather, look extremely bad. What else can we say? Just insane. But anyways, guys, that said, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you were new, and until next time, God bless and peace.